The revelation Ada could no longer bear the weight of the strange events consuming her life. The sleepless nights, the whispers in her ears, the visions of pythons, they all haunted her, each moment worse than the last. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall, her mind racing. "Enough is enough," she muttered. Chidinma entered the room, carrying a bowl of gari and groundnuts. "Ada, you've been acting strange for weeks now. What's going on with you?" Ada hesitated, her hands trembling. Then, like a dam breaking, the words spilled out. "Chidinma, something has been happening to me. Ever since I visited your village's stream, I've been seeing things, hearing voices. Pythons everywhere, they're in my dreams, the market, even in cars. I think something followed me." Chidinma froze, her expression turning from confusion to shock. The bowl in her hand slipped, scattering groundnuts across the floor. "You what?" Chidinma shouted, her voice echoing in the small room. "Why didn't you tell me since?" "I was scared," Ada cried. "I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to burden you with something I couldn't even understand. You're lucky nothing worse has happened to you." Chidinma snapped, pacing the room. "Ada, this is serious. This isn't something you keep to yourself. My father needs to know. Right now." Chidinma wasted no time. She grabbed her phone and called her father, speaking quickly in their dialect. Ada sat quietly, her heart pounding as she listened to Chidinma's urgent tone. When she hung up, Chidinma turned to her. "He says we need to come back to the village immediately. He's taking us to the chief priest." Ada's stomach churned, but she nodded. "If it will end this nightmare, I'll go." The journey back to Chidinma's village felt heavier than before. Ada stared out of the window, dreading the encounter ahead. When they arrived, Chidinma's father was waiting for them outside his home, his face grim. Without a word, he led them to the shrine of the chief priest. The air around the sacred place was heavy, the scent of incense and herbs filling Ada's nostrils. The chief priest, an elderly man draped in traditional attire, sat cross-legged on a mat, his presence both commanding and mysterious. He raised his hand, gesturing for them to sit. "Speak," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "What troubles you, child?" Ada glanced nervously at Chidinma and her father before turning back to the priest. She recounted everything, her visit to the stream, her encounter with Madhu, and the strange events that had followed her ever since. The chief priest listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Ada finished, he leaned forward. "You mentioned a spirit gave you instructions. Tell me, what did he say was needed for the cleansing?" Ada took a deep breath, recalling Madhu's words. "He said I needed a white cockerel, untouched by any hand but mine. A calabash filled with water from Kumba River before dawn. 7 coconuts split cleanly in 2. And a piece of red cloth soaked in palm oil." The chief priest's eyes narrowed, and he stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Are you certain these are the items he listed?" "Yes," Ada replied firmly. "I memorized them. This is what he said." The priest's expression darkened, and he turned to Chidinma's father. "These are not items for a cleansing ritual." Chidinma gasped. "What do you mean?" "These items," the priest continued, "are used to set someone free from bondage. They are not meant to appease the gods. They are meant to break chains. If this spirit gave her such a list, it means she is not under the anger of the gods but bound by something far older and more dangerous." Ada's heart sank. "Bound? What does that mean?" The priest's gaze fixed on her, piercing and unwavering. "It means the spirit who gave you these instructions is playing a game of power. He seeks to use you to break free from his own constraints. You are not cursed by the gods, but you are caught in something far worse, a deal with the river itself." Ada's breath quickened. "I didn't make any deal. I was just there." The priest nodded solemnly. "And yet you were chosen. There is no running from this now." Turning back to Chidinma's father, the priest continued. "I have most of these items, but some will need to be purchased. Go to the market and buy what is missing. We must act quickly. Chidinma's father nodded, determination etched into his face. I'll take care of it. When will the ritual take place? Chidinma asked. The priest looked at her gravely. We will prepare everything for the next Eek market day. That is the only time when the river's power will be at its weakest. The sun must be at its peak. Ada's mind swirled with fear and questions, but she forced herself to remain calm. Will this set me free? She asked quietly. The priest looked at her for a long moment before answering. If done correctly, yes. But you must be prepared for what comes next. Breaking a bond like this does not come without consequences. Ada shivered, the weight of his words settling heavily on her shoulders. She had no choice but to trust in the ritual, and to hope that it would finally bring her the peace she so desperately sought. The cleansing and the revelation. The day of the cleansing arrived, and the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. The sun was high in the sky, its rays beating down on the sacred river. Ada stood nervously at the edge of the forest, clutching the items for the ritual. Beside her, the chief priest held his staff, his face stern and unreadable. Only you and I will enter the river, the priest said firmly. His voice carried the weight of authority, silencing any protest Ada might have had. Chidinma and her father stood a few feet away, their expressions a mixture of concern and curiosity. Chidinma touched Ada's shoulder. Be brave, she whispered. You'll be fine. Ada nodded, though her heart pounded in her chest. The chief priest led her down the narrow path to the riverbank. The air was thick with the scent of water lilies and damp earth. When they reached the shore, the chief priest raised his staff and spoke in a commanding tone. Spirits of the sacred waters, we come in peace. We come as you have requested, to cleanse this child and restore balance. Allow us to approach without harm. For a moment, the river was still, as though listening. Then, a faint ripple spread across its surface, as if granting permission. The priest gestured for Ada to follow, and they stepped closer to the water's edge. The priest knelt and arranged the ritual items carefully. The white cockerel, the calabash of river water, the kola nuts, and the red cloth soaked in palm oil. He began chanting, his voice deep and rhythmic, blending with the natural sounds of the river. Child, he said, motioning to Ada. Kneel. Ada obeyed, her knees sinking into the soft earth. The priest continued his incantations, his voice rising in intensity. The river began to stir, its surface rippling and churning. The air grew heavy, charged with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, the river erupted, rumbling violently as though something massive was stirring beneath its depths. Ada's eyes flew open and she gasped. Emerging from the water was Madhu, but he was no longer the merman she had met before. This time he appeared as a strikingly handsome young man, his skin gleaming, his form radiating strength and vitality. He was completely naked, his presence commanding yet oddly serene. Ada's breath hitched as their eyes met. Madhu, she whispered. Madhu ignored her, his gaze fixed on the chief priest. The priest was deep in his incantations, his body swaying slightly as though he were in a trance. Madhu approached him, his steps silent despite the wet ground. He touched the priest's shoulder gently. You have done it, Madhu said, his voice calm but firm. The priest's eyes snapped open, startled. He turned to face Madhu, his expression a mixture of confusion and shock. Who are you? Madhu smiled faintly. I am the one you have set free. You performed the ritual perfectly, and now I am no longer bound to the river. The priest stared at him, his mind racing to comprehend what he was seeing. What do you mean? Who are you? I was once a man like you, Madhu said. But the Queen Mother of the River claimed me after I died in an accident. 4 years I have served her, waiting for the day I could be freed. This ritual, your ritual, has done what I could not. The priest was silent for a moment, then nodded. If this is true, we must leave now. The waters are restless. He reached into his bag, pulled out a black wrapper, and handed it to Madhu. "Cover yourself." Madhu wrapped the cloth around his waist, and the three of them hurried back to the hill where Chidinma and her father were waiting. Chapter 10. A truth revealed. When Ada, Madhu, and the priest reached the hill, Chidinma and her father's jaws dropped at the sight of Madhu. "Who is this?" Chidinma asked, her eyes wide. "What happened?" her father added, his voice tense. The chief priest raised a hand. "We'll explain later. Let's leave this place first." The group made their way back to the chief priest's shrine. Once they were safely inside, everyone turned to Madhu. "Now," the priest said, "tell us who you are and how you came to be bound to the river." Madhu sat down, the black wrapper tied securely around his waist. He smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and sorrow in his eyes. "My name is Madhu," he began. "I was 27 years old when I died. I had a family, a mother, a father, but I lost everything in a car accident. It happened on the bridge that connects the village to the expressway. My car plunged into the river, and I drowned." Ada gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Madhu continued, his tone steady. "When I died, the Queen Mother of the river appeared to me. She offered me a choice: to continue my journey to the underworld or to remain in the river as one of her servants. I chose to stay, thinking it was better than death. But I didn't realize the cost. 4 years I served her, trapped in a world without day or night, without time. Until I saw you, Ada." "Me?" Ada asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," Madhu said with a small laugh. "When you entered the river on the sacred day, I saw an opportunity. I gave you the list, knowing it would be used to free me. And as you can see, it worked." Ada's face twisted with anger. "So you used me. What about me? Am I free now?" Madhu chuckled softly. Partially. Chidinma interjected. "What do you mean?" Madhu leaned forward. "The ritual was designed to focus on freeing me. But it also began the process of your cleansing. The rest will happen naturally, if you're brave enough to face it." "What do you mean, face it?" Ada asked. "The snakes you see, the voices you hear, they will fade over time if you ignore them," Madhu explained. "It's like curing a mad person. Even after they're healed, they may still act out until they fully recover. Spirits are more afraid of humans than you think. If they truly had ultimate power, no one would remain on Earth. Their world and ours are separate, but fear is the bridge that connects them." The chief priest nodded solemnly. "What you've said is true, but mortals must not speak so freely of the world of spirits. Today's events are unprecedented and must remain that way. No one can know." Chidinma's father looked at Madhu. "What will you do now?" Madhu smiled. "I'll return to the city. I have resources, gold, money. I'll fabricate a story about surviving the accident and start over. All I need is some clothes and a little cash for transportation." The priest gestured to Chidinma's father. "Take him to your house. Help him with what he needs." As they left, the priest stood alone in his shrine, gazing at the sky, his thoughts heavy. A new beginning. After Chidinma's father gave Madhu clothes and some money, he also handed his daughter cash for transport. Ada and Chidinma boarded a taxi back to the city with Madhu, who tried to make small talk with Ada during the ride. But Ada, exhausted and wary, barely responded. They arrived late in the evening, and Chidinma offered Madhu their couch for the night. As they slept, Ada was jolted awake by a nightmare of a python in the woods, ready to swallow her. She screamed, only to find Madhu staring at her from the couch. "Another dream?" he asked calmly. Ada nodded, still shaken. "Why aren't you sleeping?" Madhu shrugged. "Maybe it's because I'm getting used to being human again. It's not like the water world." "Please," Ada groaned. "Stop talking about the water." "All right," Madhu said, smiling softly. "But remember this: if you see anything in your dreams again, don't run. Stand your ground and see what happens." Ada eventually drifted back to sleep, only to dream of a snake trying to crawl around her neck. Fear gripped her, but Madhu's advice echoed in her mind. Summoning her courage, she grabbed the snake and flung it away. She woke up to find Madhu watching her again. "You did well," he said simply. Ada gave a small nod, her confidence growing. The next morning, Madhu thanked them for their hospitality and left. Ada and Chidinma returned to school, where Ada began to confront the voices that had once tormented her. During lectures, when she heard her name being called, she stayed firm, refusing to react. Day by day, the whispers faded, and the nightmares grew less frequent. One evening, Ada and Chidinma returned home to find Madhu waiting at their door. "I thought you were gone," Chidinma said, surprised. "I came back to say goodbye and to show my gratitude," Madhu replied. "I've reclaimed my money and jewelry, and I wanted to share something with you both." He handed them an envelope of cash, but Ada shook her head firmly. "We don't need your money or gifts. Thank you, but no." Madhu hesitated before speaking again. "Ada, can I talk to you alone?" Chidinma gave them space, heading inside. Madhu stepped closer to Ada, his tone soft. "Ada, I know this is sudden, but I have to tell you I'm in love with you. You saved me, and I've never felt this way before. Please, can we give this a chance?" Ada took a step back, her eyes wide. "What are you saying, Madhu? After everything that's happened, now you're talking about love?" "I know it's fast," Madhu admitted. "I'll give you time to think about it. But I love you, Ada. I'll wait." Ada shook her head. "I'm sorry, Madhu. Can't. My life has been turned upside down, and I'm not ready for this." Madhu fell silent for a moment before handing her a small notebook. "This is my number. If you ever change your mind, call me." Over time, Ada grew stronger, her bravery extinguishing the lingering fears. The voices and dreams eventually disappeared, leaving her free to reclaim her peace. She focused on her studies, her friendship with Chidinma, and her life in the city. As for Madhu, he disappeared from their lives, leaving only his parting words and his phone number. Ada never called. Years later, sitting under the glow of the city lights, Ada reflected on her journey. What had once felt like a nightmare had become a source of strength. She had faced the unknown, confronted her fears, and emerged stronger than ever. And though her encounter with Madhu and the world of spirits would always remain a strange chapter in her life, she carried the lessons with her: courage, resilience, and the power of standing her ground. In the end, Ada had not only freed herself but found a new sense of purpose. The end.